Well, here's a shot of the back end of the 280Z. You can see we have our 5 kilowatt charger in the center here. And once the carpet and the pad is in place, it will only stick up, maybe an inch, if that much, above the carpet. But not too many places to locate something that size, so that's where it's going. We have our rear battery box in place, and we have a junction box where the intertie to our charger and our J1772 take place. We have a terminal strip, and so everything that runs to the front comes off this terminal strip on one side. The other are the components in the back here, such as the disable for the charger, the shunt, which is down in here, as well as our pilot and proximity for the J1772 also. And then we have our pack fuse. This fuse is between the front and rear packs, and then everything runs up front through holes that were already existing, that were already grommeted and everything. I mean, just really slick. It's nice that the car has provided us with all. We have had to drill very few holes or anything in this vehicle. Now, this sits below the level of the stock rear deck back here that you can see was hinged, tilted up for access for the spare tire. Now, so we're below that level, so once this is back together, like I said, the only thing that will show you that this is not bone stock will be a little bit of the cooling fins that will stand up above the carpet. But from the rear, you cannot see the battery rack. Well, maybe through the exhaust hole there just a little bit, if I get the right angle. But from the rear you will not. And I'm a foot off the ground right now. And so the rear tank, you know, the gas tank showed on the rear before, as well as the muffler and the exhaust. So aesthetically, less shows now than did originally. Let's take a look at the front racks. We have the controllers just being fit in here, so this was all in regards to fitting the wiring from the motor to the controllers and from our contactor box, so forth. So everything is kind of routed. It's not all completely wired. You can see the wiring for the controllers just held in place, and so it's got to be routed, connected, so forth. Still have to do the inserts for the front battery box, and all of that is coming along nicely. Like I said in a previous video, the cells are bottom balanced and ready to be installed. So just some of the fabrication. So once these battery rack inserts, the ABS inserts, are complete, they'll go in the cells and be buttoned up. And so the wiring's coming along. Once all the wiring is finished and connected, then that will be loomed and cleaned up also. So coming along. So now stay tuned for a few little tips on how to do a few things on your own conversion. Hello, I'm Richard with EV4U Custom Conversions. Well, today we're going to not just look at some of the progress which you've just seen, but we're also going to talk about a few little things that we do in a matter of course in the conversion process that might help you in a time or ease sense. So the most important thing though is the big picture, is the big picture understanding of how everything has to fit relative to one another. For instance, you know, our chill plates, they're relatively high in this conversion. And so that creates a little bit of a challenge because our reservoir and fill point has to be above that. And so we kind of have to figure all this out going into it, not after the fact, but beforehand. You know, where you're going to locate the batteries is one of the first things that you're going to think about because they take up the most real estate. And so, you know, the motor is pretty much dictated where it's going to go, especially if you're, you know, retaining the original drivetrain, and so you're mounting to the transmission. So the motor, which I'm sitting on right now, is dictated. So we then need to figure out where the batteries are going to go, and then once that's done, and there's a lot to figuring that. It's just not a volumetric equation. It's balancing weight, making sure that we have the right weight displacement front to rear, left to right, and keeping our center of gravity low, so forth. So there are things that are dictated to us, but there's also things that we need to consider in our overall design. But basically, once you have those big things taken care of, you know, this being the you know, dual motor setup, we've got two controllers. So now we have to figure out where two controllers are going to go. We've got two contactors, two motor fuses, you know, just a lot more, you know, real estate to deal with. And so, and you got to make sure that it all fits in the space that you have to work with. So that's kind of the basic sequence, is we go from the largest to the smallest. It's easier to find where to put a pump for a cooling system than it is to fit, you know, 48 180 amp hour CALB cells. And so that's the sequence we use. Now, one of the things that we like to do is use existing holes. So the holes that go through the firewall here, which we've grommeted, you always want to use some type of grommet or pass-through that will protect your wiring. Don't just go through sheet metal. It will eventually cut through your insulation and you'll have a problem. So the two holes that we're going through with the wiring were existing. The mounting holes for the throttle right here were existing. We made a little bracket that would accommodate those, as well as the throttle. We used the linkage from the original setup. So from the pedal to here, it's all stock. And we just had to connect this to our electronic throttle. So again, you know, placement, layout. Basically on this car, all of our conversion electronics is right here, one spot. There was nothing here to begin with, except for some, you know, stock wiring that ran by in the area. But we added some terminal strips, a fuse block, and some relays. The AVC2 is here. That's what works with the J1772. And we also use it as a safety interlock, which disables the vehicle while you're charging so that you can't drive the car, move the car while it's plugged in. So this vehicle's been very nice. 90% of the holes were already here. These are existing bolts that we saved, that something came off from this mounting point. We saved the hardware and we're reusing it and have attached, you know, things to it. The main disconnect right here the two mounting hole bolts right here, existing holes. We made the mounting plate, but real sweet. Our contactor box, it mounts where the horns mounted. So we added a piece of angle that goes between the two horn mounts. We used those bolting mounts. The horns are in the exact same place they always were. The bolt was long enough to, accommodate what we were adding. You have to look at things. You probably spend a little bit more time looking at things, thinking about things. But when you do, things kind of come together real nice like this, and you avoid drilling holes and making any modifications. This vehicle, like all the others that we do, could go back to its original stock form and no one would be the wiser. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about some of this in a moment. But I want to talk about being prepared. So, having the modular setup that we have where I can remove this contactor box pretty quick and easy because of the way we set things up. The front battery rack, hook it up to our hoist, it's up out of the way. Allows me to be able to come in here and do work without bending over the fender. Don't like to lean over the fenders and so forth, even though we protect everything. Just prefer not to lean against the car. So this allows us to work inside the engine bay and get all this done. Lastly, that battery rack, which in this case we're going to have it loaded and everything when we drop it down. So we won't be leaning over the thing. But we have things that, for what I'm doing and finishing up, just finishing up the wiring, still have to loom some stuff and secure some things, but being prepared. I've got all my tools laid out right here, got schematics. I don't have to climb in and out all the time. I come in one time, do my job, climb out. So I mentioned looming. We use lots of wire ties, zip ties, whatever you want to call them, to bundle the wire, keep things neat and orderly. And that's something you need to think about. When you run a wire, where's it going to and from? And route it in such a way that it's going to be out of the way for everything. It's not going to be next to anything that gets hot. It's not going to be next to anything that's going to rub against it, and so forth. And we try to do everything in a very organized fashion. And then once all that's done, then we cover it with this split loom, which cleans it all up as well as keeps it all together and protected. But you'll see, this is just an example. All of our conversions are done in a similar fashion. This particular one, because this is the AC 35x2, we've got 6 cables, double-aught cables that run from the motor to both our controllers. And so that's 6 cables, like that. And so they all run on one side of the engine bay is all the motor control. On the other side is all our supply. So I've got the rear pack. One of these coming in is from the rear pack, and it's going to go to the front pack. And that'll be that tie-in. It actually goes from here back to the fuse that you saw on the rear. So we have a fuse between the front and rear packs. The other one that's coming in is the most negative and goes to a bus bar here, which then branches off, goes through our motor fuses and to the negative on the controllers. So also off of that, we've got other things that are running off pack negative, such as the DC to DC converter and the heater. And so all that's on one side. Our main disconnect right here, because our most positive is going to come off that battery pack, the front battery pack here, and it's going to go to here. And then from here, through the switch, again, it goes to both of our contactors that then go to the two controllers. Also coming off of here is the charger. So we've got a line that runs back. So this is the most positive point. Runs back to the battery charger, pack charger. The other one goes behind the dash and, you know, provides positive pack voltage for the DC to DC converter and the heater. And also we got a small wire coming off here which goes to our instrumentation. That's providing the pack voltage positive point right there. But all that's disconnected when the switch is off. When this switch is off, our pack is disconnected from everything. Okay? So again, like I said, we've got all the electronics on one side here of the firewall. So the throttle's here, this is our inertia switch, and then this is our electronics. Now, nice thing about using terminal strips, I like to use them, is it allows me to again have that modular setup. So if I need to disconnect something, you know, I can disconnect it right there and it leaves. So typically one side of our terminal strip will be the component side and the other side will be the vehicle side, the hardwired side. So it makes things clean and orderly, but also makes good test points. Because I know what this is right here, I know what the voltage should be there or whatever. If I had to do some troubleshooting, it's going to make troubleshooting a lot easier. So that's another key thing when doing your conversion, is take lots of notes. When you put something in, make sure you add that to your schematic. Make sure you make like the terminal strips. Each terminal strip has its own legend and it tells where that terminal strip is located, and this side goes where, that side goes there. All that is logged because you won't remember a year from now. I certainly can't remember from week to week, let alone year to year. So if a customer called us and there was a problem, we could tell them, you know, check here and here. And all that information is provided to the customer. They get a binder, has all the schematics, all the legends, all the component manufacturer's materials, all that is provided. All right, let's talk about a few other things. Running the high voltage cables, or the pack voltage cables, the double aught. One of the things that we do is when you run this, we'll connect it to one end. Connect it at one end, run your cable the route that it has to go, and then make a mark so you know how long to cut it. And then we cut it, and then we'll lay it to where it lays with its own natural bend and everything. You know, this comes off a big spool, and so it has a natural bend, and we don't want to go against that bend. We tend to go with that. And you want to lay it out and then be able to see, you know, where does this lug need to go? How is it, you know, which way do we need to rotate this that it's going to mate up without putting a twist in the cable or going kind of against the grain, so to speak. And then I make a mark with a Sharpie on top there, and that will be the top. So then when I go to the workbench and I put the lug on, crimp it on, I know which way to direct that lug so that it's the way that I want it. Another thing that we do is we use tubing. So you got to plan ahead a lot of times. You know, if you got a fitting or something, you know, it'll have to go on sometimes before you put the lug on, because the lug is a larger diameter than the wire. And so if things fit tight, you have to plan ahead. So a lot of times we know if we're going to have a point where something's going to make contact with something that's got an edge to it, we'll take a piece of hose and sleeve it. If you find out afterwards, you go, you know what, I don't like the way that's up against this, you can always take the hose, split it, put it on there, hit it with a wire tie or two. And so that's what we've done in here. I'll get some close-up shots, but everything is secured so nothing's going to be moving around. Also, I want to make sure that when you're doing your wiring that you're not pulling everything really tight. You don't want tight, taut wires. Always have it to where there's some gentle curves and so forth, so that there's room for things to move around and vibrate a little bit and not cause wear. This high voltage cable and everything, the way all this is all secure. It's not going to vibrate around. It's designed not to, but where it connects to something else, there's these gentle bends. And so, especially going to the motor. The motor is shock mounted. It will have the ability to move ever so slightly, where everything on the vehicle is rigid to one another, and so it shouldn't be moving. Well, I think that's enough. Oh, the other thing is test things as you go along. So like, you know, when we installed the brake vacuum pump, you know, we tested that at the time. After we put in wired up our safety interlock, our low voltage cutout, our inertia switch, all these things which control our key switch interface, the power to the controller, we then test to make sure we have that 12 volts. And one of the things that we do multiple times is we check everything, and we'll start from the source and check it all the way through to completion to make sure that it's wired correctly. Because part of being human is that we can make mistakes. And so you want to double check and make sure that you haven't made a mistake before you apply power to things. The other important thing is fuses are your friend. Use lots of fuses. Our pack is fused, our controllers, our motors are fused, and all of our circuits are fused. So anyway, just give you a little close-up shot around the engine compartment. Thus far, like I said, it's still a work in progress. We still have to finish up the inserts for the front battery rack. We still have just a little bit of wiring left to do, and of course the cleanup on that, and the cooling system. Cooling system is one of the last things that's going in, and so we have to mount and we're running dual cooling systems. Each controller has its own radiator, pump, and so that all has to be installed and hooked up. So as always, if you have any questions, don't post it on the YouTube channel. It may or may not get responded to. But if you want a response, you can email us at info@evforyounow.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments. And I thank you for watching. We've got probably 2 more videos in this series, maybe 3. And of course the last one will be going for the test drive. So stay with us, and thanks for watching. So this is the close-up of the firewall, which has most of the wiring. Like I said, these have not been wire tied or loomed or anything yet. This is just the routing And so you have some original wires that kind of run on top of everything there. That's original wiring that's part of the vehicle wiring. And so our stuff had to go kind of behind that. You can see we have some empty spots on the one terminal strip. That's for anything that might be added later by vehicle owner. Also have some wires that run from front to rear. If you wanted to do that, that's already run while we were doing it. And the wires all run down underneath the car, tucked up out of the way, and they follow the original fuel line points that all the fuel return and vapor and all that, those lines all run, and the brake lines all ran in that same spot. So this runs where the fuel lines originally ran. There's a vacuum pump. Again, the reservoir is down below. Kind of hard to see it down there. Let me back up a little bit. There it is. Kind of hard to see through the lens, but anyway, there's the gauge on it. But using the original, right there, that's the original hose that came off the booster. It had all the right angles and everything to drop down there and then come up to our pump. So that worked out real slick, and it was a perfect little tucked away spot to put that reservoir, because we really don't have a lot of room in this engine bay. It's kind of a tight fit. Like I said, here's all the wires here. We don't have our terminal boots on anything yet because they're just being routed and all that at this point. So that is yet to take place. And so earlier we had them connected to the controllers, make sure everything fit the way we wanted. So there's our main disconnect, the 12-volt auxiliary battery. Our contactor box. And so the pumps on either side, the cooling pumps will go right in that corner. The radiators will go in the front here, where just kind of below the controller here, kind of that space. Behind the stock grill here, and there's upper and lower portions here. That will be blocked off with ABS for aerodynamic purposes. We don't want air flowing in there. Then the reservoirs will be on either side of the controller, right in this area right here. And so everything is fitting very nicely. So I was talking about where here's the horn. We just went from that bracket to the one on the other side. So didn't have to drill any holes. All I had to do is make a little mount. So as you can see, we still have some wiring to finish and to clean up and to loom. but we're getting close. See you next time.